I once heard Louise Voigt say, children don't need social workers, they need parents, right? And I think that's a great thing to keep in our minds. Children need parents. And that's, that commitment, I suppose, what is a parent? Let's just think about that for a second. A parent is someone who is ultimately responsible for a child's well-being, okay? Ultimately responsible. Caseworkers get changed. They move on. They have a caseload. Parents persist and are there. That's their role. Their role is to be the carers of children. And Barnardos does a wonderful thing. So I've been overseeing a piece of work on children's identity formation in the context of open adoption. Are most of you familiar with that piece of work? Have you come across it? Yeah. Now that represents a very small number of children that Barnardos cares for. So, it's just that perhaps we might describe it as a tip of an iceberg. But I think it's a very significant a portion of children. Those are the children for whom there's very little chance, no, let's be honest, there's no chance of restoration. And there's no chance of kin care in these particular cases. In fact, when Louise Voigt first spoke to me about this group of children, I said, well, you want me to do a major piece of research on 10 children or something like that? Is this utilisation of resource justified? And she said, no, you'd be shocked at how many children fall into this category just in New South Wales. So we need some clear thinking around the strategies there. And together with Lynn Mogger and Sue Tregeagle, I was able to help think around some of those problems. So let me say a little bit about that work that I've done. There's a report, I think it's due to be published any day. Yeah. The Institute for Open Adoption Studies at University, congratulations on being involved in that. I'm not part of that, although I'm very happy to be a research collaborator with the Institute. I'm going to publish a report on children's identity formation in the context of open adoption. And this report is in some senses about open adoption for under 5 children from non-Aboriginal backgrounds in the New South Wales legislative context. It's a super specific question. But it's also a report about the needs of children, right? And that's where my particular expertise becomes relevant. What we learned, if I can just sort of distill the things that we learned and that I learned as well, and some of which I reaffirmed, adoption's a very, very good option for children. Did you know that? You probably knew that already, yeah? But one thing I can tell you with absolute certainty is that if you compare children who've been adopted with children who've not been adopted from the same circumstances, okay, that's really important. The children who've been adopted do much better on all those sorts of outcomes that I just described to you, things like performing in school, not having excessive emotional problems, etc., even physical growth, okay, for the very extreme cases. And another way we can ask this question is, what happens to children who've been adopted early versus children who've been adopted late? And again, it's the same story. The children who've been adopted early do better than children who've been adopted late. These findings are not controversial, actually. I was very reassured by the literature, by the body of work that underpins the legislation. It's very sound. But the story doesn't end there, right? Because we all know that the needs of children who are adopted, children in care, are complicated. And we all know that one day you're very likely, in many cases, not every case, in many cases, and this is I'm talking a bit dramatically here, but you're likely to have a day of reckoning where a child says, or a young person says, why was I adopted? Why didn't people care for me? Why was this done to me? And we have to give an account of that to the child. And the best account to give of that is the one that they're already aware of through open adoption. If a child has a sense always that they were adopted, they have a truthful narrative around that, they won't feel betrayed later on when they learn new things. If they've gone on the journey through adoption with a family, then they have a robust, and this I think is one of the key findings of the report, they have a robust sense of themselves as an adopted person. You have to think of the child as a thinker, not just someone who needs comfort and care and security. The child needs information, they need knowledge. Did you know, let me tell you a bit of developmental psychology you may not be aware of. How old do you think a child has to be before they know, through their experience of you, whether you are a reliable or an unreliable source of information? 6? 7? Well, between 3 and 4 years of age. 3-year-olds are fairly trusting. By 4, if you've proven to be an unreliable source of information in certain domains, the children won't remember what you tell them. For children who felt a breach of trust, it's extremely difficult to get that trust back. So children don't just trust in the emotional and physical aspects of relationships, they trust in the informational and intellectual and narrative aspects of relationships. And this turns out to be acutely important for adoption. Because as the child is growing, they're forming a, if you like, and this is a metaphor, they're forming a narrative sense of who they are, where they fit. And they will grab from their society, their community, important pieces of information that they feel that they need to give an account of themselves and be satisfied with who they are. We might stand back as intellectuals and say, well, why does it really matter who your real mother is? And people have said this stuff, right? Okay. It doesn't matter what your argument, how compelling and powerful your argument is. If that child needs that information, it's experienced as an acute need. Sometimes an absolutely overwhelming need, right? Children are not in a privileged position to anticipate their needs, but as the people who care for them, we are, and children need the capacity to change. If you put that together with what I told you about information earlier, they need the capacity to revisit again and again questions about who they are, where they come from, why they were put on this earth, why people have done certain things to them, and so on and so forth. You get a very good picture about how adoption works well. It works well when it's done early. It works well when there are good reasons for it. Why is that, you say? Well, because one day you have to tell this child why they were adopted, and those reasons have to be acceptable to them, right? And there are other reasons as well, but from that, that's how I see the world. And it works well when you adopt a position of communicative openness. Right? I don't think adoption is a cure-all or a panacea, but I think under the right conditions, it is the least worst option. The fact that you're taking the least bad option is a moral decision, but it doesn't make the decision that you took free from causing harm, and it doesn't not have moral consequences. And this is adoption and foster care and permanency planning. It is a perfect example of these issues. It's wrong to take kids away from their families, right? But it's the least bad option. And there it is, as simple as that. And I think when we accept that, we think much better about how to care for the children whose needs we are in a privileged position to anticipate. All right? And if we can't stand by the actions we've taken and give a narrative and reasons for those actions which are satisfactory to the children whose lives they've affected, then we might have made some mistakes in what we've done. But if we can, it doesn't mean that we're morally self-righteous. If we can, what it means is we've walked that narrow path, that very difficult path about balancing the needs of the child in a complex environment where there's no ideal solution. But if we can say to a child, if we can assist them on their journey along the way in such a way that we can say to them, this is what we need to do now because this is in your best interests. And it's not without harm and it's not easy, but it's what we have to do now. If we can do that, then we're serving children well.